Hopefully you got a chance to see the videos on Skills USA and another segment from the 60-minute story that featured ALCOA. We are in the home stretch, and I will say that the energy and feedback and the fact that we still can't quiet you down during breaks is a good sign. And as I talked to some of the colleagues from our country panel that had to depart, they looked and said, boy, this is a long overdue conversation. So it's really important that we've taken this time today. And I'm going to facilitate the last session here. And I'm actually going to look kind of to the control booth. Ah, there we go. So I know I have colleagues that are up on the line. And as we were closing out the last session, I said, you know, the last panel is going to come back to our role and responsibility as manufacturers and the opportunity to lead. In fact, let us lead. And that's actually a big theme at the National Association of Manufacturers, that we as manufacturers own a piece of our destiny, and that we need to be accountable and active. And as we stood before 300 plus of our nation's manufacturers at the end of October, we called for something as simple as a national pledge. Tell us that you have the commitment. We're not going to define how you engage at the local and community level, but we want to know what you're doing. And I'll come back at the end and sort of the best practices, but I'm so honored as we look to our colleagues virtually and here in the panel to be joined by a distinguished group of manufacturing leaders. First, Peter Zierhut, Vice President, European Operations for HAAS. Peter, give us a wave. There we go. Excellent. Next, virtually, Dennis Parker, Assistant Manager, North American Production Support Center for Toyota. Dennis? Excellent. You guys can hear us okay? Great. And then here on stage, as we blend technology in a virtual environment, we have Joe Pietrantonio, and Joe is in fact Global Vice President, Environmental Health and Safety, Quality Air Products and Chemicals. And then Scott Hudson, Principal Manager for Social Responsibility and Community Outreach for the ALCOA Foundation. And Scott, I again need to take the opportunity to both you and Deloitte to thank you for your leadership, your support for making today happen, because a part of this brainchild is not just somebody had a good idea, but it was somebody had a good idea and we looked for all the right partners to come together to figure out how we build that idea. So thank you again, Scott. So maybe having struggled on the technology front, we'll start with a question for each of our panelists and maybe speak a little bit to the challenges that we face in building our workforce. So what I recognize about each of these panelists is, in fact, they not only support programs, but they also have a commitment to that systemic approach. So Dennis, maybe we can start with Toyota. And can you share a little bit about Toyota's approach in building a community action strategy to meet your workforce demands?
So sure, and I would like to thank you for being allowed to join today and like to welcome everyone who is part of this symposium. Very basically, Toyota is a problem-solving company, and so I'll start with some of the problems that we see. And on the very top of that is we understand as a global company that we need to be competitive globally with our business product, and to do that, we have to have people, we have to have talent that is globally competitive, talent that is on par with or better than the best in the world. Another problem that we face is that with skilled technicians specifically, that it's becoming very competitive to recruit top talent skilled technicians, and in fact there are not enough of them out there for everyone who needs them. So that landscape is becoming much more difficult to deal with. And so what we have done is we have put together a systemic approach. We first look at the output, what is it in terms of human talent and capability that we need with our technicians. And we've built a very tightly integrated career pathway that starts all the way basically in middle schools where we first engage, but we even try to influence math and science development in K-5. And so we have a pathway that proceeds from middle school through high school to a very different kind of community college program, a very intensive program. And from that, there are some career options where team members or students can continue into skilled maintenance, but may even go to, go on toward engineering. A key component for us are partnerships. So we have partnered with the community college systems in the states in which this has been implemented thus far. We partner with the K-12 system very closely with that, including visiting schools on a very frequent basis. We partner with an organization known as AMTEC, the Automotive Manufacturing Technical Education Consortium, which is developing a nationally standardized curriculum that our community colleges programs that we have can use. We partner with, of course, our universities that we have. We partner with schools individually within our K-12 system, and there are several others. But the key is we didn't reinvent the wheel. What we did is we had a principle that let's make every step of this pathway best practice, which is hard to do, often hard to do. It also includes change on the company and the manufacturing side. And let's use various partners to their best ability to do that. And the last partnership I'm going to mention is having effectively established this pathway. We get phenomenal results. Jennifer has visited and has seen our people and our results. We now are bringing other manufacturers into a special collaborative, a special partnership, who all can now share that talent pool.
Great. Thank you. While we switch screens, Joe, maybe I can turn to you and you can speak to Air Products leadership on this front.
Be happy to, and a pleasure to be here. So maybe to start, for those of you that don't know Air Products, let me describe the company for a minute because it puts what I'm going to talk about in context. So a $10 billion company in industrial gases, oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, certain specialty materials, but one of the natures of our business is that we operate very close to our customers. So we have a lot of production facilities. So for a company our size, we have 600 production locations around the world, and most of them small and mid-size. So you can imagine the challenge of workforce acquisition when you're not big anywhere. Certain regions were big. In the Gulf Coast, for example, we're big. In certain facilities, we're large. But for the most part, we've got these distributed facilities around the world. And our workforce needs span the things we've talked about today. From the technician level, we have a fairly significant trucking force, so we've got professional drivers needs, maintenance people, technicians, et cetera, all the way through the STEM education participants that might run our facilities or be a member of the management team. And as we looked at how do you start to engage throughout our company at a local level when you're at that scale, we looked for organizations where we could touch and leverage into many, many places, because we're just simply not big enough to build, as Toyota might or maybe as ALCOA might, a location at one of our facilities. So we look for those kinds of partnerships. I think we talked about a little earlier today, the question in this space of how do you leverage? How do you have great ideas but do it on a scale that makes a difference? So one of the things we got engaged with was an organization called Skills USA, and I hope some of you had a chance to see the video. Skills works with secondary and post-secondary organizations, schools around the country, frankly around the world, to help develop what we would call the 21st century employability skills. How to work in teams, how to communicate, how to work in an environment, and couple that with the technical skills that we all need in the work we do. And so that combination was appealing to us, and frankly, it was an avenue where through one organization we could go out and touch many. So the thing we did, amongst many other things we do in workforce development, but in speaking specifically to skills, we went out to our sites with a playbook and said, here's how to engage, here's how to get out in the community, get out to your community colleges, get out to your schools, talk to the kids, tell them about manufacturing, the things we talked about today, make it exciting, make it interesting, and get engaged with the curriculum development so that we could then have an approach to the workforce. Now, not completely altruistic, right? We sort of sent our folks out because we wanted to be in the schools finding the best kids to come work for us, and frankly, it's been a great avenue. So I think it is that point of engagement that we talked about earlier. How do you find what works for you, and how do you then get out and into the community and into the school system to help build the workforce?
Great, and I'll say if any of you have not been to a Skills USA competition and doubt the commitment of this nation's young people, boy, it is a raise the roof revival. Yeah. At our sweet spot. Yeah. So Joe, good for...
Could I just add to that since you raised it? So if you saw the video, that happened to be shots from the national convention. This is part of the organization. A lot of what it does is help kids compete to be the best welder or the best baker in the nation. And so it's that act of competing, that act of striving for something that changes the kid's character. It might be the first time ever somebody said you could be the best welder. And so they strive for that, and it changes their character, changes who they are. It culminates in the national convention, state level, local level conventions. It culminates in that national convention. And it's 6,000 kids competing to be the best at what they do. And I describe it, it's like a rock concert about education and skills. And you just don't get to go to many of those. So I invite any of you who want to come, give me a call, and we'll go in June. It's a great experience.
Great. Thank you for that invitation. We might have to take him up and take a contingent. Peter, I'm going to turn to you because, interestingly enough, I've heard from stage several times today the need for machinists and NIMS certified individuals. And I certainly know that HAAS has been a leader on this front. So maybe you can share with the audience how you've leveraged your partnerships to advance this critical workforce gap.
Sure, and thank you for having me. I guess first off, we're the little guy in this group here. HAAS is a relatively new company. We're a machine tool manufacturer. We're only about $1 billion in sales, so I guess that makes us a small guy compared to Toyota and Air Products and ALCOA. Not exactly a household name, but we do manufacture the machine tools that are used to make core products for almost every industry. The Toyotas and the Air Products of the world are our customers. And yes, what we recognize, we've grown very quickly, and what we've recognized in recent years is that unless we can provide a more readily available, a better trained and a better capable workforce, our industry is going to suffer, and it has, I think, in recent years. So we put a lot of effort into developing this program that we have. It's called EdgeTech, HAAS Technical Education Centers. And EdgeTech is a network of 1,172 schools in North America that we partner with. They're high schools, they're vocational schools, community colleges, and universities. Our partnership with them involves providing HAAS products, HAAS machine tools to those educational institutions at discounted or even free in some cases. And the glue that holds it all together is a value-added set of benefits that we offer to these schools. We provide, or we bring them together in regional and national conferences. We provide them access to low-cost or free software and tooling from partners, and we provide certification. We think that's also a very important part of providing this kind of training and making it, I guess, standardizing it across the country, and making it something that is something you can take from one manufacturer, one company to another. We work very closely with an organization, by the way, called NIMS, the National Institute of Metalworking Skills. And that's kind of, just a brief explanation of our efforts to try and provide a more capable, a better trained workforce in the area of machining, which is a pretty narrow niche.
Great, thank you, Peter. And what I will say is, though he may not be a household name in every home in America, every community college in their machining program knows who HAAS is. And as I travel through community colleges across the country, I often then look at the brands and make sure that they are in fact training on the latest technology. Matt Meyer from North Carolina mentioned, it's important to have state-of-the-art technology. So to have the kinds of partnerships so that the individuals coming out have the latest and greatest, because as we've all talked about today, that one constant in our environment is change. Scott, I'm going to look to you because I need to tout ALCOA's horn here for a little bit, because though we haven't in fact given a broad-based overview of the Institute's agenda beyond being the national expert on behalf of manufacturers for the attraction, qualification, and development of world-class talent, there's an entire standards-based architecture that's community-focused. And as I look around this room, I know for the most part, we're in your backyards behind the scenes. And as we have built partnerships, interestingly enough, our initial investors came from the philanthropic community. And they did that because they saw it as an opportunity to promote the skills of target populations, at-risk kids, low-income adults. And as we then thought about who our most important customer is at the Institute, we really recognized our most important customer is our nation's manufacturers, and that they need to be active and invest. And the ALCOA Foundation was actually the first corporate philanthropy to invest in the Institute to then support that capacity building activity at the community level. So Scott, if I may turn to you, because I will say it was a bold move by the foundation. And if you can share a little bit with what you saw as the opportunity to break the mold, to try a different approach so that we could in fact start to meet that skills gap at the community level.
Well, with ALCOA, I mean, as you know, we're a mining, manufacturing, engineering company. And while we do have a lot of different sorts of partnerships, it's regional with community colleges. The idea was to be able to support this idea of certification on a national level. And what we've done is we've implemented it in communities where we have operations. So with the Manufacturing Institute, it's been able to identify the community colleges that can participate and then pair that with our locations. So the idea is we're ALCOA Foundation, so our dollars can't be used to benefit ALCOA, but we can align. And when that align works, and how that alignment works, is it is an opportunity to leverage ALCOA's expertise with our training programs that all of you have in manufacturing, as well as leadership and team types of development opportunities. It's also an opportunity to showcase our leadership and our leadership's commitment. I mean, Klaus Kleinfeld, CEO of ALCOA, has been on 60 Minutes. He's been in an op-ed piece at USA Today. He's spoken many times about how to close this manufacturing skills gap. So the partnership with Manufacturing Institute has really given us a much broader community-based type of opportunity to showcase our commitment to it and also to leverage our expertise as well as our leadership. The other thing too that ALCOA Foundation is doing is supporting other types of initiatives to keep the conversation going from different perspectives. We have different research projects, for instance with the Brookings Institution, one on the Workforce Investment Act reform, another one is on metropolitan areas and manufacturing, and one we're considering with American Enterprise Institute, which is looking at occupational training. So from a public policy standpoint, this research is being used broadly by corporations, by NGOs, universities, et cetera, to really take a look at what kind of public partnerships could be developed. And then lastly, what we're trying to do is promote manufacturing, manufacturing careers. And a lot of these different sorts of initiatives that I've spoken about actually do that. And it's Manufacturing Institute is actually part of a global portfolio, if you will, of what we call STEM-capable career or workforce development that includes all along the talent value chain. We have a program with the American the Academy for Model Aeronautics, which is really a program for elementary and middle school where it gives them the hands-on experience that a lot of you have been talking about in developing a different flyer. ALCOA volunteers have a kit, they can go into the school, the teachers then can use it. We also support First Tech And this is all on a global level, and we're very happy to have this in numerous countries. And again, this is the hands-on type of opportunity with high school and secondary students in working as a team on a very specific type of opportunity, usually with a robot, solving a social issue. Then we also have the Manufacturing Institute, and we also have some other sorts of types of initiatives, especially, for instance, at the college and university level with Engineers Without Borders. I mean, a big issue right now is how do you keep engineering students engaged? And a lot of times they don't feel engaged because they're working so hard in the classroom that what is the end game for how their skills are actually going to be utilized? And this is the millennial generation, and I love what Ann was talking about before about the demographics. This is the generation that wants to do well by doing good. Maybe I mixed it up, grammatically it's not correct, but that's what they're about. And the program we have, again, that's global with Engineering Without Borders, is an opportunity for them to see it. And it's also where professors really enjoy it because they don't get funding for that, but here's an opportunity. So a long-winded answer to your question.
No, but a great example of this is not one solution that's going to solve this problem. I'm going to bring up a question that I'm not sure I heard an answer from the morning employer panel, so my apologies, gentlemen, in advance. But the question was pretty persistent this morning in terms of the measurement of value, and how do you, in fact, measure value? And Dennis, I'm going to turn to you first, knowing the TPS process as I do, and world-renowned Toyota Production Systems, and I know you measure what matters. So can you share with participants from a business perspective how you actually look at and evaluate the success of these partnerships when you know the payoff is a generation away?
Sure, and so I want to make the business connection to that. So probably at the highest level, what Toyota looks at, actual measures to say, are we doing what we need to do? Well, let's first go to sales. Of course, we want to sell cars, and we want to sell enough cars, with that. But then when we bring that down to our manufacturing operations, excuse me, 5 key indicators that we look at are safety, quality, productivity, cost, and human development. We realize that in the end, everything that we do is based on human development. So then we have, I explained this career pathway before, we have a way to connect on the production floor. I'm going to go to our skilled maintenance groups again, because that's the program we're highlighting today. I didn't say it earlier, Advanced Manufacturing Technician Program. We call it AMT. We actually have a system that goes to a work team and identifies exactly what that work team's tasks are and how they impact production. And so we can know what work impacts production and how that's done. We have a way to then assess each team member's ability on all of those tasks and identify what they can do and what their gaps are. Based on the gaps, we can then connect that to our company training system to get the right training for the right skill gaps that impacts production. And then we can use our career pathway to build the right talent to be able to do the kind of training that we do into the company that I just mentioned, that addresses those skill gaps. And so we have measures all the way down the system. And so besides the system that I just mentioned, we call it the Manufacturing Qualification System, MQS, we then have targets for our whole career pathway in the school. So we look at how well a student does. We evaluate their floor performance. When they're working as part of their education, part of their pay is based on their grades and so forth, and so we have measures there. And then we have a huge database that we track through the whole system as they go through the pathway so that we know how they're doing, what works, what doesn't work, and we have data which helps us to improve the program. For example, we think the best practice program out in the K-12 system is Project Lead the Way. Do Project Lead the Way graduates actually perform better on the whole than those who aren't? We have data to show that, where that is, and why that is. Bottom line, to tie it all together, we can connect that all the way from our talent development through our skilled work, impact on our production, affects our productivity and cost. Does that help a little bit? Is that where you were going with the question?
It absolutely was, and I'll equally say it also helps the communities and build the communities that you're in. So there is a larger impact, and then there's a direct impact. Joe, from your engagement with skills, tell me what you've seen. Back to the point of, yes, you want to inspire and engage the next generation, but not all of it is completely selfless. So tell me how you guys look at and value the partnership with skills and how you measure success.
So I suspect that most of us on the panel are going to have a long series of measurements because we're all measurement crazy. Right? So we will measure just about everything that's possible. But in this area, we're really trying to understand, are we filling our workforce needs? So the measures around what are our gaps, how are we filling them, how fast are we filling them, is it helping us to fill them? That is kind of our primary measure of this, of an element of this relationship, which is it helping to solve the major challenge we see in front of us, which is having the right workforce in the right place at the right time when we need it. So if you think about that suite of measures that you might have around sort of gauging how you're doing, always difficult, by the way, to isolate any one thing you're doing in those activities, but you can get some directional view to that. And then, as was just described, and then how all that rolls up into the other things you look for, productivity, performance, et cetera. The one thing we didn't talk about that I'll add in, and maybe wasn't an intended, didn't set out to measure it or think or start on this, but has been an enormous output, is the engagement of our employees and the satisfaction they get with being with the kids and being in the schools. And we almost can't measure their community engagement and their community involvement and the spirit they bring. And of course, what's that do for us? It's brand value and brand equity. Because we're out there, we're being seen, and we've got great people who are enthusiastic about being in the community. And from an employee perspective, they're just loving doing it. So we don't try to measure that, by the way, but you know, there's clearly a benefit in the organization to that piece as well.
So that's an interesting note because somebody said earlier, engage the employees and they will engage. And if we think about the public perception, what better ambassador than our own front line? How do we empower them and enable them to be successful in their communities?
I have a little anecdote. Was a young lady in Texas who was in the program, and she came to work for us for an internship. And at the end of it, she sort of stood up with the guys that she was with and did a final presentation. She said, there is no way I would have thought about being in manufacturing before this. And I love it now. I love all of you. And, you know, it was one of those. And you say, well, if you can have that effect, okay, we need to scale it because one at a time is a tough way to get there. But if we can have that effect, it's going to make a difference.
Yeah. Peter, I'm going to turn to you for a second because I can remember one of my colleague manufacturers in Wisconsin was good to remind me that nothing happens until a sale is made. And I can imagine that if in fact you're in the business of selling machines that machine things, that if in fact somebody doesn't know how they're going to run that machine, that's probably prevents the sale from happening. Because when employers look to make an investment, they're not just thinking about the productivity improvements in their facility. They're also wondering how they're going to get the job done. So Peter, from the efforts that you've had with the network that you've built, can you share how that has been part of the solution, not just for you, but for your customers?
Well, the EdgeTech Network was never intended to be a substitute for selling products to customers. I mean, you know, in fact, this started kind of accidentally. The idea was that we wanted some more showrooms for our products across the country, and it developed. We quickly realized the benefits of putting machines into these educational institutions. The fact is that you know, the machinery that is being placed in these schools is being used to train the next generation of our customers. These are our customers in the future, and it's kind of hard to measure, you know, exactly what the benefit is, you know, as far as sales. In fact, you can't measure, I think, how this benefits you in sales down the road. You can make some estimates. But what we can measure is from the school standpoint, working with the educators, how successful we are at training that next generation, and how successful they are at placing them in jobs, in real jobs. If they're actually ending up in jobs, we're meeting our needs. We're supplying that workforce that is so critical right now. And that's how we measure it. How many students end up getting trained and how many students end up getting placed in jobs. So that's really the most important way to measure it, not necessarily by the number of machines we sell as a result of this. In fact, this program is a cost center to the company, and that's okay as long as the end result is that we feed the needs of our customers for the future.
And I think that would be an important strategy in the investment, because I'd venture to say your customers need those workers. So through the EdgeTech Network, you have the ability to say, here's where we know they're getting, as we talked about earlier, the direct hands-on experience that makes them valuable and productive on day one for our nation's manufacturers, which we know time and time again, that's really the kinds of partnerships that they're looking for. I'm going to switch gears here just a little bit because, Scott, you actually mentioned this, so I'm going to come back to you. And I actually think over the last several years, maybe the last 5 to 10 years, we've had a whole national dialogue around STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math education. And we've had discussions sort of themed throughout today that has spoken to the opportunity to rethink what education looks like in this country and the kinds of partnerships. So as you think about ALCOA's strategy to build a STEM-capable workforce, and you look at the community college partnerships, how do the two help mirror both the technical and what has been this national dialogue on sort of high STEM skills and engineering?
Well, it's interesting because from an ALCOA Foundation standpoint, we don't have all the resources in the world. So it's very strategic in terms of why did we decide to focus on community colleges. And we realized the huge gap that everybody has talked about today is really in the skilled operator and skilled trades area. So it's a strategic decision to go with community colleges and to work with the Manufacturing Institute. But we also realize you have to feed the pipeline. But in feeding the pipeline, we're not like the Gates Foundation that can provide a lot of resources in a very concentrated way, where it's curriculum development, teacher training, an incredible evaluation type of system, and a commitment over a long period of time. As Paula Davis, the president of ALCOA Foundation, likes to say, we can't boil the ocean. So what we're trying to do is, through these other sorts of programs that we have, with AMA and the Flight Research Kit, and then with First Tech, and then all the way up through Engineers Without Borders and some other sorts of partnerships, is talking about the careers in manufacturing. So we're hoping that we can get at it that way. And then with the schools, instead of focusing specifically on schools, is really providing resources that teachers can use and also that our volunteers can go in and work either as mentors or even helping to develop curriculum. So that's how this sort of works all the way around and complements what we're doing with the Manufacturing Institute and with community colleges.
I often like to say in stage, especially whenever I have a group of governors, manufacturing is STEM. We, in fact, are where STEM happens. We may learn it a little different, but we are the applied STEM pathway. So it's always important that we have the opportunity to make sure others recognize that, because often when we think of that dialogue on STEM, people naturally migrate to the four-year side of the equation.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. I actually think it's interesting that all of you have selected, and I know skills is both in high schools and in community colleges, but community colleges is an important gateway to employment and opportunity. And I'm curious and interested to understand one of the challenges that we've seen in working with our nation's manufacturers is education is really a parochial activity. And what have you learned, for example, Joe, with the playbook as you go to replicate some of these best practices from one community to another, the kinds of challenges that you've run into in expanding these very successful models? So, Joe, maybe we can start with you.
So maybe really easily for us, it's been two things. It's you have to figure out who and how to engage and sort of speak the language. And frankly, we're not in the business of doing that. We're in the business of making industrial gases and so figuring out how to engage our community college system and who it should be, or our post-secondary system and who it should be, and how to get the right spot in the right place and be able to speak the language has been top of the list in helping to educate our site managers around the world and others who have done this so that they know where and how to engage. And that probably took us the longest to get going because it was just something we didn't understand, and frankly, has some variety to it depending on where you are in the country. And then the second thing, and this seems obvious, and someone said it earlier, is sort of know what the ask is. We know what we want, and we in the beginning we sort of walked in a bit more. Let's have a discussion about something we might all like to do together. And as we got more focused and said, no, we care about this, and we want to talk about it, it made it easier on the receiving end. That's where sort of our head was at all along, but we needed to be specific enough. And it's been interesting to watch. A number of because again, we tend to be in smaller places, and a number of the community colleges we've been into and high schools we've been into have said, you're the first time somebody's actually showed up. So it's time to show up, industry. That's something that we unfortunately need to do because we've had the luxury of not having to do it.
Dennis, how about for you? Because I know you've had extensive, in fact, the Kentucky facility is at the front end of just starting to deal with its first turnover and retirement. But you not only have looked in Kentucky, but across your footprint. So can you share a little bit with what your approach to success has been in replication?
Yeah, so to highlight a little bit of the problem that you just mentioned, we now have 15 prime manufacturing locations across North America. The first large vehicle plant that we built was in Kentucky. It's been in operation for 25 years now with that. And so here's the effect that we've had. For 25 years, we've been building plants, hiring people, building capability. The Kentucky plant is now about to begin experiencing a significant turnover of talent due to retirement. We know that the dynamic that we will be facing for the next 25 years is in the same order that these plants were built and went into operation. We're now going to be losing that talent and having to replace it. It goes back to one of the problems I first mentioned when we started the symposium a few minutes ago. And so what our basic plan is we started at Kentucky. It's where I'm located at. Even though my organization is not part of the Kentucky plant, they're next door to us. They're like our educational laboratory. We developed the program that I mentioned. And so rather than having to go out and find people, find skilled workers who are already there, we still do that, by the way, but we can now supplement it with this driven quality path that we have with a community college partner who teaches the program that we have. It's been successful at Kentucky. Students enrolled in our West Virginia plant with their college partner this fall, it's this semester, started in August. Currently, Indiana plant is recruiting for its first class, which will start this coming fall of 13. And now our Texas and Mississippi plants also plan to start this coming fall. So what we're doing is as we're looking at this larger regional problem that we have, and we're looking at our successful partnership with colleges. By the way, tremendous credit has to go to Bluegrass Community and Technical College for leading the way with a lot of paradigm changes in education. They've been tremendous with doing this. So in taking this college partner model, local plant, a local college, working really closely together to recruit people in the schools, encourage people in the schools. K-12 is what I'm speaking of, and then bring them through this pathway. That is our first answer among several to not only replacing the talent that we will lose, but we actually intend to reload the gun, so to speak, with a higher caliber, better trained up front, better engagement with the plant, and use that as we go through the turnover for all of our plants.
Great. Peter, in your circumstance, so we've talked a little bit about you walked in the door and you needed to know what the ask was. I want to flip to the other side. I know we have a number of education partners that are in the room, and they may not know our language or know how to speak to us. So Peter, as you've built your network, how do community colleges engage? Is it phone a friend?
That's a tough one because I think this is not typically it's not typical for a community college to contact an industry and ask. Some may disagree, I think, but what we found is I think there was a real learning curve for many of the schools across the country in engaging with industry. I know a lot of people do it very well, but there are an awful lot of schools across the country who are just realizing that unless they go out and engage and connect with industry, and that isn't just for sake of placing their students in jobs, but also in connecting to industry like HAAS that can provide them with products to do the training. Toyota is a great example because we've actually admired their program for quite a long time and learned a lot from it. An awful lot of the community colleges we work in have a Toyota program now, and they've done a great job connecting with colleges and promoting their program. But I think that it really takes a lot of work on our part as a manufacturer to go out and find the partners, find the schools, and that's kind of where we've been successful. Is not waiting for the schools to come to us and call us up and ask, but rather to kind of build something. With the schools that we have now, what we've built is a kind of a networking opportunity for them, where they hold now regional meetings all across the country, and at these regional meetings, the schools will, or we will, or our distributors will go out and invite other educational institutions to come in, learn what we're doing, and through that means we're actually connecting to a lot more schools today. A good example would be something that just happened here recently. We've been pretty bad, I guess, at developing the network here in California. But recently we were able to connect to a school in Oceanside, a community college in Oceanside, specifically because our distributor, who had been calling on them for many years, invited them out to learn more about what we're doing, talk to other schools that are actually producing right now successful programs, and kind of get enthusiastic or interested in that program and develop from there. So it really takes a lot of proactive work, I think, to go out and develop these programs and to show educators what's available.
I'd be curious if I can just add a follow-up. Is your point of entry the community college president or the instructor?
You know, that's interesting because usually it's someone at the instructor level, and that's a really important point. The most successful programs across the country today seem to have one thing in common, and that's a champion at the educator level. It's usually someone who's really engaged as an instructor or maybe a department head. But and that's not to say there aren't some very motivated and forward-thinking administrators, but more often than not, it really is that person who's on the line working with students and understands the needs of industry.
Great. It really does take a champion. Scott, how about for the ALCOA footprint? Is it a plant manager or is it through I would say in part, I know it's through the Institute. I don't mean it to be a loaded question and to answer it myself.
Once again,
I know, but take me out of the equation and let's pretend for a second it was a random high school or community college that really wanted to understand. What's kind of the best point of entry?
Well, it's an interesting point you raised, because through the partnership with Manufacturing Institute, did I say that? Yeah. No, in all seriousness, ALCOA has had relationships with community colleges before, and very meaningful ones, but it's kind of around the country, and the depth of that relationship can vary. But through the relationship with the Manufacturing Institute is our locations are able to see what is the value of having these relationships, and more importantly, on an acyclical basis. Usually it's like you engage with a community college if there's a hiring need. And then if there isn't, but the whole point is to get it where, wow, you can remain engaged. Curriculum isn't going to be developed in a 6-month period so you can hire somebody, as you all know. So it's being able to break down that kind of acyclical, or make it acyclical, so there's a steady engagement. And we're getting more of that, hopefully through our partnership with the Manufacturing Institute and in working with the locations.
Great. We have a question?
Yeah, hi, I'm speaking on behalf of somebody who sent in a question, but I think your point about sort of this acyclic nature and the impact of the community colleges, I often hear the concern, will they be back to the table when they don't have an immediate hiring need? And I think that is a space of mutual relationship to be built, right? Lots of companies see the problem, but you, in fact, across the board have chosen to act. What has made you different, and what will it take for industry as a whole to get involved in a sort of a perpetual solution to this?
It's a great question. Joe, you want to start with that?
It is a great question, because we even ask ourselves that, sort of how did we get to where we got to? I think in business, everything starts with a need somewhere. And our need was, we could see the workforce demographics, we could see the change we needed, we could see the talent development we needed for the future, and couldn't use the traditional model of getting there and how we'd done it in the past. And so then we started looking for what are the avenues to do that. And I think I mentioned it earlier, one of the things that was important to me at the time, and I happened to be running our operations at that point, was that it was leverageable, because we're so small we can't, and so you find a channel that works for you. But in the same way we talked about community college, I think ultimately in companies it takes the need, and it takes somebody who's motivated to go challenge that need and try to push it forward some, and it's the combination.
Great. Dennis, did you have thoughts?
Sure. So one of the things that we do, or I think this is a basic question, continuing this partnership with the college and not backing out and coming back in. By the very way that we're structured with our AMT program, Advanced Manufacturing Technician at Kentucky, it actually builds in our continued relationship. The program we have is very different from the usual college program. It has a tightly designed structure. Very basically, students will be in class all day long, 2 days a week, and therefore that's a big commitment by the school. And so one of the things that we have to do for them is we need to make sure for them to make those kinds of changes that we also pony up with our part of it, which is we make sure that they always have the students there, for that. And so that's actually built in and designed into our system. We work with each school to say, what is the minimum number of people that you need class over class with that? The program is structured in certain ways that it makes it a little bit easier for us to do that, but also it's one among many of the key reasons that we have the Manufacturing Development Collaborative, this group of companies that are now coming together around the program. This year we need so many, and that company doesn't need so many, but next year we don't need so many, but they need more. And the companies as a group always maintain a critical mass of students for the school. And so the very nature of the AMT program is that it must be a very close relationship that continues indefinitely with the school.
Great.
Can I add something to my
Please.
answer, because in listening, it made me think. So one of the things, we all work for people who work for people who ultimately work for people who run the company, and it does take either support or some at least direction at that level. And I bet if we go around, we'll find that's true. And so I know, if I think about the Skills USA experience, one of the things Skills does is recognize an industry leader, and our chairman, John McNelly, was the first one recognized. The second one recognized was Jim Lentz of Toyota. So, in that case, I can tell that there are leaders in the companies that we're talking about that either help this to move, or at least certainly support the direction. And that's another important element, I think, in anything we do.
So I just need to point out that this year's skills champion is Nick Pinchuk from Snap-on.
Yes.
So how great is it that manufacturing is dominating, despite the fact that skills has a whole myriad of other occupations? Peter, did you have thoughts on that?
Well, I heard the word perpetual. How long will these programs continue? Well, a need it's true. As long as there are needs in industry for skilled machinists, we're going to have to continue supporting these programs, and we will. I think the bigger problem we have right now, though, is that we're seeing an awful lot of schools shut down their training programs because they evaluate and decide that it's a lot cheaper to hold to put together a call it an English class than it is a machinist training program. And machinists are hard to find. I mean, we're running into an awful lot of roadblocks where educational institutions are cutting back or some of its budgets too, I suppose. But they're finding it difficult to support a program like this. Now we can provide our products, and even if we provide our products at no cost to a school, there's still an awful lot of expense in running a program and hiring an instructor, and that's, I think, a bigger issue right now. We'll continue to support the programs, but I think we need to see more support for education from local and national government.
That's actually an interesting point, because what I also know, I do believe that higher education is at the front end of major structural cost pressures. And if anybody knows and has been through that path, it is in fact our nation's manufacturers. And Steve Rufo, shout out to you, who has looked at sort of the leaning process as it relates to things like higher education. And I do think we have not just equipment and leadership that we lend, we have a depth and wealth of knowledge as to how you reorganize and how you rethink about the world of work. Because the other thing I heard on the previous panel, Secretary Oates mentioned this, was within the community college environment, there still is that channel of the flexible side is the non-credit corporate college side, which may or may not transfer into an academic pathway versus the lockstep in an education pathway. So I think all the way around there's a lot of leadership that we can offer to the education system. We are winding down our time together, so I would like to close with sort of a parting thought from each of our industry leaders, and that is, as you look to the very diverse audience that we have here, and those that are on the web, and those that we have access to through the promotions of the proceedings and others, if you had that first step, Matt, I'm following off on you. I'm not even getting 3 steps. Just one step to take activity to the next level, what would that guidance be? Scott, maybe I could start with you.
I was hoping you'd start.
Okay.
This whole issue of capacity building, I think, is very important because with capacity building, you're developing this infrastructure that will be able to sustain and also bring light to a lot of different issues around that change. So I would say the capacity to a certain extent. However, I would also say that it's also the engagement and really looking at companies like ours is that we have a meaningful voice, and that it's important for manufacturers to realize the value of having that voice in training decisions, program decisions about manufacturing, all sorts of things. because for so long, it's like we haven't had that voice, and others have been making those decisions basically for manufacturers.
Great. Dennis?
And so if I had a parting thought, and I'm going to direct this to companies because this answer will encompass the rest, it's to realize that in the end, your company and your business is no better and no worse than the talent of your people. And the talent of your people is going to largely depend on the educational organizations and people that you interact with. And so here is the parting thought. Tomorrow, start engaging much more deeply with your local educators. Don't wait for them to come to you. Don't wait for something to come from that direction. Go and knock on their door. Tell them you would like to learn about their programs. Go into their classrooms and sustain that dialogue. And if you do just that, there is a whole world of activity that will come from that will make a difference in your workforce. You'll see the difference.
Great. Peter?
I have a very, very similar point. I urge, and again aimed to the employers, the companies in the audience, go out and get connected. You look at Skills USA, great opportunity for people to get engaged. We've been supporting Skills for some time and think it's a great opportunity to get connected. But everyone needs to go out, connect with their university, their schools, their community colleges, whether it's a university, community college, high school, anything, and see how you can connect to help develop educational programs that will benefit your industry in the future.
Great. Joe?
So it's going to be, as someone once told me in communication, be redundant and boring. I always said, I'll work on the first, I have the second down pat. So I think I'm going to say the same thing, which is, I think the whole discussion today and kind of our national dialogue, this door is open for us to say, we know we have the need, we know there needs to be a connection that comes together, we have to do something different than we're doing. And what I think all of us, industry in particular, but all of us can do is find that point of engagement. And it starts with what's most important to you. What is it that's so important that you need to solve that problem, wherever you sit in this equation, and then engage, because the dialogue is open.
Great. I'd like to help me in thanking our panel and all the great thoughts that they have brought forward today. Well, if they will, I'm happy to close out from here if you guys will so indulge me for just a few moments. This has been an incredible day, and again, long overdue and never enough. And if there's one thing I heard fairly consistently from the last panel, it's really, let us stand in lead. And it's regardless of where you sit in that equation, be it a community college partner, a K-12 partner, community-based organization, or an industry executive, we all really own this problem. And today's discussion really spoke to the fact that we are a manufacturing ecosystem. And not only are we a manufacturing ecosystem here in our own borders, but we are part of this great global manufacturing economy. And the best thing we can do for ourselves and for the competitiveness of our country and our communities is stand and lead. So here is my commitment to you. The Institute's mission is to get up every day and worry about this. But we need your partnership. To the manufacturers in the room and the educators in the room, tell us your story. Take the manufacturing pledge. Commit that you will, in fact, engage in your community. Second, the results of today's conversation is not the end. I never like to do anything just to check a box or just to call a meeting and have a nice program, meet some great people. In the end, this information is truly going to inform the global dialogue. It's going to inform it from the practices that we highlight, and more importantly, it's going to inform the strategies that we integrate on the ground. So as we go into communities to align public-private partnerships and to build coalitions of manufacturers to engage, because Dennis is absolutely right, one week you may have hiring needs and the next week you don't. But in the end, education still runs. So it truly takes that close coordination and collaboration. I also will commit that one of the big themes that we talked about today was the public perception. I can't claim to be the sole source of the solution to this answer, but I'm willing to sit down with my peers and have a thoughtful discussion. Because I'll come back to the fact that I know every one of these problems has been solved somewhere, and what we struggle from is how we take it, pay it forward, and replicate it. So as part of our commitment, we equally will give thought to how we engage better in that public dialogue. To my colleagues at Deloitte, we'll look at it from a research lens to see what can we do to strengthen the headlines that we see that then in fact inform the conversation and the public policy leaders. As we wind down, again, today's session was recorded. We hope to have the proceedings up by the end of January. We encourage that everyone that has a best practice to please share that forward. And as I recognize, it is in fact a group that drives change, thoughtful and committed group. I want to again thank my partners, the ALCOA Foundation and Deloitte, for their support and execution equally. The Institute of Metalworking Skills, National Institute of Metalworking Skills, they certainly were present even though they were out of the country today. So well present along with the balance of our certification partners. I also would like to just take a minute and ask that the Deloitte and Institute team stand, because for any organization to pull off the magnitude of what we have done here today, it takes an unbelievably committed and talented team. So thanks to you guys, the ones that actually make it happen. So, and most important, thanks to you for taking time out of your very, very busy schedules to showing up and to engaging, but more importantly, to walking out the door and leading. Thank you.